I mean, then it becomes a soap opera, doesn't it, Madhu Trehan?
Well, Arnab, I want to make 2 points here. One, the transparency that we are seeing in Britain today has not come only from the politicians or their system. It's come because The Guardian exposed the news of the world's antics. So it first started with one news organization exposing another's. Now, in India, we are so much like Sidney Shanberg of Washington Post once wrote, that no news organization is willing to admit its deficiencies or of its peers, because they could very easily be turned on them. And he did say also that we all have dirty linen. Now, we all know the story of paid news. We all know the story of treaties, private treaties made with channels and politicians and corporate media. So there is a huge amount of grey in terms of journalistic ethics at this point. I don't think we've done some journalists have done some amazing stories. They've risked their lives to do it, doing them and afterwards with threats. But the point is that I don't think that journalism has ever been more murky and corrupt as it is today, in terms of from the establishment downwards, meaning the news owners of the news organizations, which makes it the culture that you're seeing in the news of the world came from the top, that go for anything. And if you looked at the cracks in his testimony, where it was completely prepared, of course, by a PR company and rehearsed, and he took his time like Vajpayee to answer his questions when it suited him. The point was that he did crack when somebody asked him the question that, would you now reconsider the kind of headlines you've been doing now that you are the center of that kind of attention? And his answer, I think, was more telling than anything else that he said. And that was that, yes, he never said yes, I'll take that back. He said, we will be looking at headlines. There is, of course, a matter of taste. I'm not quoting verbatim, but the gist of it was that he says it's a matter of taste, but we have to keep in mind that we're in the area of competition, and we have to be competitive. Now, even if after apology and his most humble day and all that, he can still say that we have to be competitive and we will not change our tone in terms of headlines, whichever papers or news organizations he's running, you can then see that the culture that was happening at News of the World came from the top. So if you're seeing any kind of collusion journalists are doing with politicians or whatever, it's generally because the culture of that organization has okayed it.
Well, let me ask you, Suhail, you wanted to come. Let me ask you, do you genuinely feel that issues like Rajya Gate, issues like cash for votes, issues like the 2G scam and the parliamentary hearings need not be matters of public debate in terms of being televised anymore? I mean, aren't you worried? Let's take a look, Suhail, at what's happening in News of the World. Without James and Rupert Murdoch testifying today on television, where would the story go?
Nowhere.
It would fizzle out.
And I think they should. I said it on your channel on November 18, 2010, when the first signs of the Radia tape broke, and Vinod was with me on the program, Vinod Mehta, and I said that if there is a violation of probity, of proper behavior, where there is collusion, you must have proceedings which are televised. And look, it's not about transparency alone. It's about the public actually beginning to believe our parliamentarians, and not all of them are bad. But the fact is that all of them are tarred by the same brush for their lack of transparency and the perception that there is collusion. A. B. I also believe that televised proceedings will force them to be better prepared, will force them to be neutral as far as the train of questioning is concerned. You know, Madhu talks about collusion. Madhu Trehan is well aware of the apology that why India had to render to the Delhi High Court, because they did a survey many years ago on corruption levels within judges.
It was a mistake.
So there is a mechanism
on my part.
of the system. I beg your pardon?
Yeah. I want to say today publicly that I feel it was a mistake on my part.
Yeah.
And in today's climate, I don't think I would have even asked for an apology. It wouldn't have happened. I don't think any bench would have even filed a contempt of court against me for that, because what has come out subsequently showed that we were on the right track. And I do regret that apology.
Absolutely.
Because there have been corrupt judiciary. The point over here is that when we're talking about transparency, we are completely not transparent in journalism. For example, there's a certain amount of really lazy journalism where we simply take the plants and publish them. Why has no journalist gone after who taped Neera Radia, etc. Who was behind it? These things don't happen on their own. There are thousands of tapings done. Who leaked it? Nobody has exposed that. That's all part of lack of transparency within journalism.
No, but then, Madhu, I have an answer for that. Because if that's the question, I want to hear that question being put to an investigating agency chief. And I don't think there is any national security issue there that needs to be kept away from the people of this country.
But Arnab, this is exactly my point.
Right.
I don't think Neera Radia is a national security issue.
Well, then if everything is turned out to be a national security issue, everything is turned out to be a major secret. No,
but Arnab, if you remember,
I agree with Arnab.
If you remember on your channel, I said it is not a national security issue and it must be investigated for the people to see if there is collusion which leads to malified intent or impropriety.
No,
having said that, it is not the media alone that needs to stand to transparency.
No, people need to be reassured. Chandan Mitra, the only point is people need to be reassured. The people of Britain are hurt. The people of India are hurt at Radia Gate. The people of India are hurt at 2G scam. The people of India are hurt at cash.
No, but why has the real story of Radia tapes not come out?
Well, nobody's seen about
the tapes.
1 minute.
Because it's all happening behind closed doors of Parliament. Yes, Chandan Mitra.
Yeah, Arnab, my point is, there is all very fine to demand that all parliamentary committees should be televised. But why don't we start with televising court proceedings?
Not all.
Not all.
No, I mean...
Soli Sorabjee says not all.
Okay, all or not all. That is not for us to decide. That will be for Parliament to decide, if at all this is opened up. But the point is that why not televise court proceedings? You would have A. Raja and Kani Moji and Suresh Kalmadi.
I completely agree with Chandan.
And the country as a whole can listen to the grilling that goes on. You know, this was done in Italy as an anti-corruption measure. I have quoted this many times. And this is how, in fact, corruption levels came down dramatically in Italy. So before you demand a JPC be opened up, why don't you seek permission to the court? Anybody can go in, take down notes. If print journalism is allowed, why not TV journalism? I think, maybe Soli Sorabjee will have a point here. I believe, in fact, before you talk about JPCs and parliamentary committees, which are only a part of Parliament, Parliament itself is televised. So you see everything what's going on. Now, why not televise courts also?
No,
you will have transparency.
The debate tonight is happening in the context of the apparent blurring of lines between the source, the politician, corporate interests and journalists, reflecting a deep running malaise in the system. If we think media does not have that problem, but if we think that media is out of it, I think we are fooling ourselves. And we also need to be part of that transparency. Now, Soli Sorabjee, what kind of things can be televised? You said issues of national importance. What kind of things can be televised?
Well, it's very clear. It depends on subject matter of inquiry. Cash for votes. Is it a matter of public importance, national importance? Would it not be subverting democracy? So these proceedings, what's the objection? I want to ask my dear friend Chandan, don't say this is for Parliament to decide. It is really decide on the basis of the real nature of the public interest in the proceedings. So that's why I said you may be right.
Somebody has to decide.
Not all committees, not all proceedings, but certainly some of the proceedings, if at least to remove the perception or misperception that there is collusion, there is something being hidden up, something is not coming out. Have transparency. Have this. At least this misperception will disappear. But what is the harm, Chandan? I don't understand this. I don't compare it to court. That's what I'm asking the question. Why not do the court? That's not the question. Why not do here? That's the question. And the answer should be to that.
Yeah. That I think is fairly well said here.
Soli.
Okay, you're rebutting Soli Sorabjee. Go ahead.
I'm in agreement with you. But my only point is, Parliament has a certain sovereignty. I mean,
so
who is going to decide what is of national importance and what is not? So I am saying that most of these matters that are being mentioned by you and Arnab are matters which are before the courts. So why not televise court proceedings? That will be at least a starting point.
But I'm for it.
See what's going on in the 2G trials.
I thought you would strongly want the complete televised proceedings of the PAC inquiry. I thought you would be the first person, Chandan Mitra, to demand what, that the entire country knows what happened between Murli Manohar Joshi and Saifuddin Soz, which otherwise we just speculate, and then you tell us that we've got the wrong story.
We heard everything on your channel. You see, with such a vibrant and vigorous television channels in India, I mean, everything that happened in
Trust
PAC,
me.
we heard later in the evening.
Trust me.
I mean, they all crossed swords, they held press conferences. What was there hidden? Everything came out by the same day.
No, trust me. I mean, I would be the first person to put a televised proceeding of a PAC discussion in place of News Eye, and I can assure you more people will watch that. The only question tonight is of transparency. Are there double standards somewhere when it comes to journalists themselves? Madhu Trehan says our profession also needs to be more transparent and open.
Of course, absolutely right. She is absolutely right, and I entirely agree with Chandan that if you want JPC to be televised, let the courts also be televised. You think there is no bias in courts? Yeah, there is nothing like playing to the gallery in the courts. Right. All the judgments which we condemn later on, including the society, I think all that condemnation of the court judgments will have completely different dimension if the courts are televised completely. We consider courts as extremely sanctimonious. We have this notion of contempt of court which doesn't exist so much in America or in England. We have this contempt of court and delinking of media from the courts and cameras. And why not televise courts if Parliament is to be televised, if JPC is to be televised, if PAC is to be televised? And moreover, and let us not over romanticize this transparency business.
Why?
I think just by having everything televised, if you think democracy will function, I think that is a very anarchic and romantic notion of democracy. Television audience does not represent the demos. Television audience does not represent the whole people of India.
Thank you, Mr. Ketkar.
And certainly not one channel or two channels. Television people are select audiences.
Mr. Ketkar, with humility, I accept your definition of me as an anarchist. I have absolutely no problem with that. But I'd like to say at the same time that, there is in India, and cash for votes is an example, isn't it? Anirudh, I take your point. But cash for votes is an example of what typically happens in the lifespan of a scam in India. It flares, then it simmers, and then it hibernates, and then it's put in the deep freeze. That is exactly what happened with the cash for vote scam as well. And how do I believe that all political parties did not get together to try and hush up the whole scam after sort of providing the people of India with that television moment? After that, you carry out a hush up. That's what happened in this case.
But Arnab,
Anirudh, I want Anirudh to answer. Anirudh.
It's a sign.
But
hello.
Go on, Anirudh.
Actually, to me, it's a sign that there was no collusion. It's because if the BJP first accused CNN and IBN of withholding the news, and then later the Congress accused them. So if two political parties are accusing you of something, so obviously there's no collusion. But just to come back and make a brief point that something that could have been televised for media transparency at least is the proceedings in the Press Council of India when they were debating the paid news report. I mean, if you want transparency, I would like to see why the paid news report was hushed up by the Press Council of India in the manner that they did hush it up. And I would like to see media barons and others being grilled about what have you, third-party treaties, paid news, and conflict of interest in media, cross-media holdings. I mean, there's a whole range of issues which we have to keep this in perspective, that what we are seeing of the News of the World right now, these were illegalities committed by reporters of News of the World. They weren't unethical breaches.
Suhail.
The Radia tapes to the journalists,
I want to give you
they also didn't commit any crimes.
Yes, Suhail, go on.
I want to give you,
Go on, Suhail.
I want to give you 3 domains which need to be covered. Number 1, look at what happened in South Africa when apartheid was removed and you had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. If you have probity and transparency and court proceedings or legislature proceedings televised qua Godhra, and Godhra is I'm just making it symbolic, so I don't want Chandan to react. I have nothing, I'm making a serious point here. Number 2, where society is divided or divisiveness is created either through communal or terror attacks. Why couldn't the Pradhan Committee proceedings be televised? Why can't we have public engagement with the proceedings for us to know how safe or unsafe our political masters have made us? And the third, which I started by saying, wherever democracy is harmed in a subversive manner, where it is manipulated and tweaked either through a cash for votes or by complete cross-benching that we've seen over and over again. I mean, for God's sake, cash for votes is nothing new. We've known what used to happen with people, crossing parties. Ayaram, Gayaram nonsense. So the point is, where citizens' rights, where citizens' safety and where the citizens' role as an elector or as a voter in a democracy is threatened, those proceedings must be televised, whether it is a courtroom or whether it is parliament or whether it is a state legislature. Only for one reason, Chandan, and I'm only saying this to Chandan because he's the only MP on our panel today.
Go on.
It will help resurrect the image of parliament / politicians. It will help the citizen understand his role and how he needs to elect better people. And finally, it will bring back the trust in the institutions which we are finally coming to anguish with, including the Supreme Court. The allegations against the former Chief Justice of India don't augur well for any institution of the respect and magnitude of the Supreme Court.
So the only answer
that also needs to be corrected.